Hello everyone, it is Christine here, and in this video I'm going to be giving you a beginner's introduction to Pojagi or Bojagi, which is a Korean kind of patchworking. Bojagi or Pojagi actually means a Korean wrapping cloth, so they're not always done in patchwork, but then this patchworking technique has also come to be known as Bojagi or Bojagi as well. And it's a lovely technique where you end up with a piece of patchwork which has a finished decorative sort of seams on one side and then the same finished decorative seams on the other side. So you don't need to back it with anything like in a quilt where you'd need to be putting something on the back, because both sides can happily be on display because there's no raw edges. And again, it's just got these beautiful decorative seams. So it's really a lovely technique and I'm really enjoying doing it. I am definitely a beginner myself, so it's a beginner's introduction from a beginner, but I've been reading up a bit on it. I've watched videos from others, which I will link to. I first, I think, heard about it or maybe saw a fellow YouTuber doing it when I saw Annie Claxton from Arty Farty Annie do it quite a while ago now. And I had a little play with it at the time, but I haven't done it on much of a scale. And what I'm wanting to create here and working on is some sails for a textile dimensional boat and sea piece that I'm working on for the next exhibition of the Southeast Contemporary Art Network. And the theme for that exhibition is winter escape, and so I'm making this boat with these really sort of, I guess, vibrant sails that's going to be sailing across the sea as though it's heading away for a winter escape to warmer climes. So that's the little story, and I'll talk a bit more about it probably in a future episode where I start to put all the pieces together. But today is all about Pojagi or Bojagi. And so generally the Korean traditional Pojagi or Bojagi cloths are square, but you can make this in whatever size you want. You'll generally sort of work with a section and then you're sort of adding other sections to it. The way I'm approaching mine is just sort of working in strips. So there's one strip here that I created first and then a second strip. And I've joined, once I had those two strips done, I joined them together again with that same seam that ends up the same on the back and the front. I've intentionally offset my squares, so I put a shorter one up here and a shorter one down here because I didn't want them perfectly lining up, partially because I quite like my stitching to be a little bit bodgy, and I just want that effect. I want these sails for the boat that I'm making to look like they are very sort of handcrafted and stitched together, possibly from maybe from old sheets or something. Maybe that's the sort of story behind the sails on this boat. And I've used some beautiful small bits I've got of Liberty fabrics, and I think there's some Yuwa Japanese fabrics in here as well. There's some William Morris Strawberry Thief, some that I've got from the Reverse Art Truck, some that I've got in little packages that I've had. So I think that's from the Sewing Lair. Oh, you couldn't see that one from the Sewing Lair. So let me show you the technique. So first of all, work out what size you want your pieces. Now you can use different sized pieces, but I thought just to keep this easy as a beginner, I would cut out some relatively standard size pieces. So I just made myself a little square template, which I then placed down on my fabric. I draw around with my friction marker and then I cut out my square. So I've got some here. The next thing is to work out sort of what order you want your fabrics to go in. Now, some people work very randomly and they don't worry too much. I want to think a bit about the distribution of colour. So I'm thinking I'll join this piece on this side. So I wouldn't mind that down there. Maybe that one next up. In fact, actually, I might put that one down the bottom. Then that one. Another one as well. I'm just looking where that other one's gone. It's over here. Got this one too. Maybe that one, that one. That one. That one. pink or maybe the yellowy one. I'm just sort of looking at where I can distribute colours through. So maybe something like that. Let me just move it down a bit so you can hopefully see most of it in frame. So along those lines, I'll just get it down a smidge more. Now for my thread, I am using just a vintage crochet thread. This is a Mercer Crochet 70 JP Coats. You can tell it's quite old by the labels. Number 70, yeah. So it's just a nice sort of off-white bone coloured crochet thread, but you could use whatever you like. I just wanted it to sort of be a neutrally tone for the thread because the boat itself that I'm creating out of textiles is a neutral sort of colour. So it's just a nice way to then link the colours down to the body of the boat. But you can really use anything. I think quite a few people like to use a contrasting thread because you really want the stitching to really kind of be one of the things that is a decorative element of it. So you can decide to start at whichever end you like. And what you're going to want to do, and I'm just going to check that I've got my iron on. Yes, I have. It'll be helpful to have an iron. If you've got one of those little small ones, that would be good. I haven't actually got mine out for this. I've got the big iron here. So what I'm going to do is take these ones up here, and you're going to get your two pieces that you want to join together to start. And what you're going to do with one of them is fold about a 1/2 inch seam. Some people use like a bone, one of those sort of bone markers that has sort of a pointy end. With the Liberty fabric, I'm finding that it sort of folds over quite well. And then I just get my iron and just give it a little press. And then with your other piece of fabric, you'll just want to fold a 1/4 inch seam, so about half of the size of the other one. And again, it's not going to be precise in mine. You might want to be more precise than I am. To get a bit warmer. Then what you're going to do, so you've got a smaller seam here, larger seam on this side. In fact, this one I might just make a tiny bit larger just to make it easier for us. So just give that another quick press. Then you're going to put your two seams together. And I've got a little thing on my finger because the needle was just starting to push through my dry winter skin. So I've just put a little band-aid on so I don't end up with a sore finger. Then I've got my crochet thread which has a knot in the end. I'm going to pop up inside the first bent over seam. I'm just going to tap the camera and make sure we're in focus. So I've basically popped up from just inside the seam, so that will be hidden. I'm going to put my two bits back together so the two seams are facing each other, and then you've got your outside of your fabric on the outside on both sides. And you're just going to line them up across the top. And then you're just going to use a whip stitch to go all the way along the edge and hopefully not have knots on the very first go. Normally that shouldn't be happening, but have we got a knot in our thread? Is that our problem? Yes, we have. Our thread's got a little knot. If we need to get a new piece, we will. We'll get a new piece because our thread did not, well, we can even possibly take this one out, and we'll just continue in a moment. Take that one out. We can probably use just the little bit of thread. We've got enough thread left here, and it's already got a knot in the end, which was the very knot that was stopping us being able to proceed. But now it's not quite a big enough knot. Isn't that funny? Now it's pulling through the fabric. Funny old thread. And I'll just get rid of the little taily bit that's there because we don't need that. Okay, so we're going to, step one, pop your thread up just through the inside of one of the seams, like that. And then you're just going to hold it together and just start, and I like to sort of just work back a little bit just from where I've come through, just to make sure I'm going right to the end. And then you're just at whatever interval you want. I like to do mine relatively close, one because it's actually a decorative stitch and so it looks nice, but you can do them, yeah, however you want them. If it's something you're going to be wearing or using like a scarf or that's going to have some wear, probably doing them quite close together is a good idea just to give it extra strength. So I'm filming this on Friday evening. It's been such a busy week at work. So I haven't made a video, but I've been playing around with Pojagi and having such a lovely time and getting other elements of my little boat piece done. So stand by. I might hopefully make another video maybe tomorrow with that piece coming together. So I'm doing some really interesting stitching using a woven base for the sea, and I'm going to be adding some wave sort of stitch detail to that, I think. And then I'll show you how I've made my little textile boat and a mast that I've made with an old vintage measuring tape. So yeah, I think it's going to come together nicely. I'm very excited. Whenever we get the prompts for our exhibitions, there's always so many ideas filling through my mind. So hopefully, if you want to sort of stitch along with me, you could just grab two pieces, cut them approximately the same. They just need to be the same on one of the edges. It doesn't actually matter if one of them's sort of, longer in other ways, but you just want one edge to be sort of matching up approximately in width. And you also just want enough that when you've folded for the seams that you're not going to have too tiny of a piece of fabric either. Because a little bit does go into the seams, which are hidden seams. So I've written down some things about Bojagi and Pojagi so that I'd remember to tell you. So yeah, usually it is, these are made usually in Korea with silk or rami. And the word Bojagi includes the sort of the words of luck, which is bok in Korean, or bo, which is happiness or fortune. And so it kind of translates as wrapping of luck, which is a lovely, lovely thing. So these are sails of luck. And the reason that it's called both Bojagi and Pojagi, so both with a B and a P, is apparently because the sounds for B and P are not distinguishable in Korean language, so therefore it ends up with both. And it goes all the way back to 57 BCE, which is amazing. But the examples from that time haven't survived, but they do have examples back from the sort of the period that began at 1392. So once you get to the end, in some of the demonstrations I've seen, they tie there and knot off. I'm not going to do that, and I haven't been doing that in my practice. What I'm going to do at this point is leave my needle threaded, and I'm then going to iron my piece, and I'm going to iron the seam both directions. So I'm going to iron it with the seam popping over this way. In fact, I just need it to sit a little bit flatter to help me out. And then I'm going to iron it so that the seam goes over the other way as well. And then what we want to do, again just keeping our needle there, is you can see we've got a seam along there. I might just bring you down a tiny bit closer, make sure we stay in focus. Bring you around this way. So there is a seam that runs along there, the one that we've just been stitching. And you can see we've got our longer bit of our folded over fabric here and our shorter bit there. What we want to do with our longer bit is just bring it over the shorter bit and bring it up to where that seam is. So we're folding it over, catching this, the shorter bit in the middle of it, and just bringing it up to where the seam is. So this is then the place where I sort of give it a push with my finger, and then I just carefully with my iron just come along and just sort of give it a bit of an iron where I want it to be. Sometimes it's a little bit, just tries to do a bit of shenanigans, but it will behave itself. And don't worry, like for me, like the charm of these things is if they are a little bit bodgy, it's not the end of the world. It actually adds to the charm. So with it like that, we are going to bring it over that way. So again, just sort of stretching it so it sits all right, like that. Again, give it just a little iron, little puff of steam to help it sit in place. It's a bit hotty tots to feel now. And then what you're going to do is then with the other piece, so we've got our little seam on this side. Hopefully you can see, and hopefully we're still in focus. So we've got our seam there that we've folded our bits of fabric over to. And then what we're going to do is fold down the other piece of fabric. I'm just going to get rid of that little thread that's trying to come out. Going to just fold this other bit of fabric so that it's up to the top where our crease line is. So you're basically, again, sandwiching the two bits of fabric together. It can be useful to have some of those little quilty clips here. And I want to do the same at this end, although that's where we'll be starting stitching, so I can always just start stitching. That's what I usually found when I was doing it. If you get one end sort of pinned in place and then the end where you have your thread already ready to go, you can just sort of pinch with your fingers. And so then my thread is down here. I'm going to bring it up through the middle where the seam is, and then I'm just going to start the stitching. Again, I might bring you out a little, well, not bring you out a little bit, there we go. And we'll just work our way along, again doing our whip stitch. And so interestingly, this technique went on through the history and culture of Korea, but then around the 1950s and 60s, apparently it basically faded out of fashion because people started using commercially sort of prepared or produced boxes and plastic bags, which is actually really sad to think that they went from something that was a lovely keepsake, but also something made out of scraps and something, sort of repurposed and reusable to something that was disposable. And it didn't really have a revival in the making of these until 1997, when apparently Bojagi were featured on some stamps in Korea and people started sort of making them again. I think they had been used over a longer period, like for weddings and ceremonial sort of gifts and things, but they definitely went out of favour for a while. So isn't that fascinating? I just love kind of learning about different cultures through textiles. It's a lovely way to connect. Sorry, my iron is sizzling away next to me. Luckily it's a cool evening here. Not like the hot weather our lovely friends in the UK have been having. I heard Sally mentioning Sally from Dotty B Vintage was having a chuckle because Christy and I were chatting with Sally, and we'd both I'd seen memes about the heat in the UK, and Christy had seen it on the news. Something where our summers in Australia tend to be pretty hot. But of course our houses are really made for, most of us have air conditioning, so at least we can stay cool. I wouldn't be able to craft in summer if I didn't have air conditioning in this room because it's upstairs, and it'd be pretty intolerable on a hot day. It starts out okay in the morning, but by the afternoon it gets hot in summer. In winter it's lovely because I get the afternoon sun through the window and keeps it even warm a little bit into the evening. I don't think this needle I'm using is as sharp as the one that I was using before. I don't know where my other one's gone. So I'll show you what this looks like in a moment. Again, I should just make sure I'm staying in focus. And yeah, Bojagi are usually made out of silk or rami, but can also be cotton, gossamer, hemp, or even paper, which I was interested to read for those of you that are into scrapbooking and paper crafts. So I'm just going to tie it off at this point because we don't need the thread anymore for this seam. Oops, managed to get myself a knot, haven't I? Fixed. And what I'll do is just secrete the end of the thread into the seam itself. So what I'll do is just go, make sure you're sort of staying on the inside of the seam, that it's not poking out either side. Go along a little bit and then you can bring your needle out and then just sort of cut it off so the needle will pop back into the seam. Not the needle, the thread, sorry. And then we'll get our iron. Oops, I just knocked my scissors down onto the floor. Give it an iron on both sides. Get rid of the loosey-goosey thready bits that are hanging off the edges. There's my bigger scissors just to give that a little trim. Trim the loosey-goosey bits. And then, as you can see, you've got a beautiful seam on this side and a beautiful seam on this side. You've got no raw edges, apart from obviously the sides, which will eventually get stitched in when you're adding them in. And so it's really as simple as that. That's all you have to be doing. I'm just going to bring you back up to normal height. So we can do another one together just so that you get the hangaroo of it. So which one? I think I want to probably put this one maybe in the middle. How's that going to look? Or did I want to put this one? Or do I want to put a yellowy? No, I was going to have yellow down the bottom, wasn't I? I think we'll go with this one. So again, let's make our longer seam on this one. Which way up do we want to go? Maybe this way. Which is the front, which is the back. With some of these fabrics, it's hard to actually tell. But we'll make this our longer seam. And it doesn't really matter which you want to make your longer or your shorter. I like to just kind of do it randomly. Sometimes people like to make the fabric that they most treasure their longer seam, and the other one their shorter seam. I'm just really taking it as it comes. And then again, turn this over to its non side, and then do a smaller seam here. So sort of half seam, half the size of the other one. But again, if you find it easier to use one of those little scoring sort of devices to run along to fold your fabric over. Some people don't like using iron. Some people also use pins for this step, but you know that I'm not a lover of pins, so anything that avoids using pins will be a good thing in my book. And again, I'm not worrying if it's slightly crooked as I go. We'll get myself a new bit of thread. Oops. See, this thread's not loving me. It was behaving so nicely, and now that it's on video, it's being very, very recalcitrant thread. Now, have I got something else in my little needles that might be sharper than that one? What have I got there? So again, we'll just put a knot in our thread. Just running that knot down to the bottom. It's good, it's right at the bottom. And then just going to put, so we've got our longer fold over and our smaller fold over, and we're just facing them against each other. So the two folded bits face against each other. we're going to pop our needle up through the seam, and then we're just going to stitch. So what else have I got written down to tell you about Bojagi? Well, in fact, the seams, for those of you that are into like maybe making clothing, you might know this as a flat felled seam. But in Korean, I think it's called a SSamsol seaming technique. But essentially, apparently the same thing. And so that flat felled seam is often used on jeans, I think. So that's fascinating as well, and I just love that sort of cross-pollination that occurs, just like amongst all of us who are creating, always cross-pollinating with ideas and inspiration, and it's just, yeah, just really lovely. But this is, yeah, a really beautiful way to use and to savour some of these lovely Liberty and special little bits of fabric that I have. I'm actually thinking this would be a lovely project to do, a lovely way to take it like a sample from each of the fabrics in my craft room as I use them and start to stitch them into maybe a quilt or a lap quilt or something. I'd definitely have more fabrics than a lap quilt size, depending what size I did them, I suppose. If I did little postage stampy ones like this, then maybe it would only be a smaller quilt. But that might be something where I just sort of plan to do like maybe a few squares a week or something. It's hard though, if I set myself up with too many projects, I get a bit, yeah, I think I've got more ambition than I have time. And we do have after this exhibition, the one that's going to run during July, there's a portrait exhibition. So I'm going to try my hand at doing some textile and fibre portraiture. So wish me luck with that. But I'm really enjoying the opportunity to kind of, yeah, push myself. And I had a lovely message on my Instagram. I only saw it last night, but it had actually been posted the day prior. So from the person who had purchased my textile artwork at the Incognito art show, which was for charity. And so they got in contact with me, which I was just delighted about, because I was hoping someone would. I'd put a note on the back of my artwork with my Instagram and my details. And yeah, they've. It looks like, I think they're from Victoria, so that's Kerry. Just in case Kerry happens to be watching. Hello, Kerry, and thank you so much. You absolutely made my day. Probably made my week, really. So I'm gonna iron it both ways. Then what we're going to do is fold our bigger seam over our smaller little flappy bit. Bring it just up to where we've done our stitches. So we're going to fold it over, press it with our fingers, give it a press, holding it in place. Use your iron just to sort of help hold it in place. If you have to do a second iron, that's okay. Give it a little poof. And then with that like that, bring it over so that it's against the other side. Again, you can just give it another iron just to help it hopefully behave itself. And then with it over that side, with your needle still threaded, you're just going to then fold the fabric on the other side to make a little equal crease, and that's where you're going to be hiding your raw edge in between those two pieces. And so our thread is on this side, so I'll just flip it over that way. Again, you could put a clip on the other end if you felt you needed it. Just depends how well your fabric is sort of, yeah, folding over on itself. Oops, I think my little band-aid is catching the thread. That maybe that's why the thread's behaving badly, because I didn't have the band-aid on before, but I just didn't want to be hurting my finger in this video. I was going to say no fingers were hurt in the making of this video, but I can't probably promise that given the amount I sometimes stab myself with my needle. Yeah, I'll definitely take part in the Incognito Art Show next year, because it's just such a lovely way to support a charity, and a charity that this year from the exhibition they were supporting artists with disabilities. So I just thought, yeah, that's a wonderful cause. Because the healing power and the nurturing power of art is, yeah, can't be underestimated, I don't think, and the joy it can bring. And that everyone can, yeah, find their own style and their own joy in creating. And there is no right or wrong. I mean, I'm sure there's purist ways of doing Pojagi or Bojagi, and I'm sure I'm probably not being purist in every aspect, but I'm finding joy in taking inspiration from a stitching textile history and culture, and the richness of that is just, yeah, a lovely thing to take inspiration from. And I just love the sort of, yeah, the reusing, repurposing in terms of creating the Bojagi, but then also the fact that they're cloths traditionally that are used over and over again to wrap items. To wrap items in luck or happiness, which is just lovely. And I like that these sails are that as well. These winter escape sails to go on my textile boat. So now we're back to this end. Again, I will tie off. I will secrete the end of my thread into the seam. Cut my thread off and we'll give it an iron. And then as you can see, that's how it's going to look. And you can either sort of offset, if you wanted it offset. In fact, was I going to have it, or was I going to have it on this? Maybe I'll have it on this side actually, because then it will be offset. Or unless I have it unless I change my mind about where I position them, which I absolutely have every rights to do, I could start it down here and then it will be offset on this side. So I won't make you watch too much more of that, but hopefully that's given you a little beginner's guide to Bojagi and given you some ideas of how you might want to use some of your precious fabrics, maybe at a smaller scale, but you can definitely adapt this to whatever size you want. And as I mentioned, all you need to do is make sure that one of the sides of your fabric is the same length. It doesn't all have to be. So you could, for example, use these two pieces, and all you would want to do is either make sure that this piece matched this side here, or you could match it up along this side and then cut it down. It only has to be the side where you're folding your seams over that need to match, and then when you come to add to it, you're either matching a bigger piece here or you're making essentially a panel and then attaching that. And that's all I did down this side. I had my two, let's just assume that this one has now been sort of finished. All I'm going to do when I want to attach it is, again, I'm going to make one of the seams wider and then one of the seams smaller. So again, that sort of 1/2 inch versus 1/4 inch seam. And then again, it's just the same process that we've been doing here. It's putting the two seams against each other and then stitching all the way with the whip stitch down the outside and then turning it over and doing exactly what we've been doing. And that's how these things just then grow over time. Likewise, if I wanted to add something to this end, I could just add 2 pieces to this end. So I could either, probably sew them first together and then add them onto this. This one's obviously longer, so if I wanted to use this one, I'd have to trim it down to match. But you can just keep adding to it. And I think, as a beginner, it's easiest to do it kind of in the blocks as you go. So I hope you've enjoyed that, and stay tuned to for my next. I think it'll probably be my next video, and I'll show you how my whole boat piece, my textile and fibre art boat piece, is coming together. Thanks everyone. Bye.